Hello everyone, welcome to Frightening Tales. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from, and if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. A tranquil night in Southern California shattered into a nightmare when police received a frantic 911 call. At the scene, they were stunned by the gruesome sight: a middle-aged man bound tightly to a bed, blood pooling from his groin. The savagery of the attack sent chills through even the most seasoned investigators. What had unfolded behind the doors of this seemingly peaceful apartment, and what dark secrets lay behind this horrific crime? Welcome, viewers. Today's case takes us to Garden Grove in Orange County, California, a city known for its vibrant Vietnamese community in Little Saigon. This quiet residential area, home to hard-working immigrant families, rarely sees serious crime, so news of a brutal domestic violence incident sent shockwaves through the community. Neighbors gathered, whispering in disbelief outside the apartment complex on Flower Street where the crime occurred, struggling to fathom that a tragedy straight out of a movie could happen next door. Some likened the perpetrator to Vol.30, the jealous and vengeful woman from classic Vietnamese literature, due to the blind cruelty of the act in the context of 2010's America. Domestic violence and crimes of passion were not uncommon, but this case stood out for its sheer brutality and a chilling role reversal. This time the victim was the husband. What drove a loving husband to become the target of a heinous crime committed by the very person who shared his bed? How did a seemingly ordinary marriage spiral into an act of unimaginable savagery? What deeper motives pushed the wife to become the perpetrator, and what hidden truths might lurk behind this tragedy? Catherine Kio Becker, 48, and her husband Glenn, nearing 60, lived in a modest Garden Grove apartment. They married in late 2009, but by mid-2011, their marriage was crumbling. Glenn filed for divorce in May 2011, though the couple continued to share the same home while sorting out legalities. On the evening of July 11, 2011, tension hung heavy in their kitchen after an argument about a friend planning to stay over. Catherine Kio's demeanor was unusually cold. She quietly prepared dinner, a familiar dish, but secretly laced her husband's portion with ambient, a sleeping pill. Unaware, Glenn only noticed something off when sudden fatigue hit him. As the drug took hold, he grew dizzy and drowsy, retiring early to rest. Once he was unconscious, Catherine set her chilling plan in motion. She retrieved ropes hidden earlier and bound Glenn's hands and feet to the bed's four corners while he lay helpless. Every detail was meticulously planned, revealing this was no impulsive act. But then, in a shocking twist, Catherine didn't flee after the calmly called 911, reporting that her husband was bleeding and needed help. When paramedics and police arrived near 11 p.m., they were horrified by the scene: a naked man tied to the bed, his groin drenched in blood. Catherine stood nearby, coolly telling officers he deserved it. Showing no trace of remorse, she was immediately restrained and arrested, while Glenn, still conscious despite excruciating pain, was rushed by ambulance to UCI Medical Center in Orange County. Police searched the scene and found the victim's severed male organ in the garbage disposal, nearly destroyed. Doctors attempted reconstructive surgery, but the damage was too severe and the severed part too mangled, rendering the effort futile. Glenn survived, able to regain normal urinary function, but he permanently lost his male function due to the irreparable loss. The psychological toll was even graver than the physical. At trial, Glenn tearfully shared that he felt he hadn't survived that fateful night. The victim's identity emerged: Glenn X, Catherine Q's lawful husband. Note: court records list the victim only as Glenn to protect his privacy, withholding his full surname. The brutal attack by his own wife left the public reeling. Questions swirled: what could drive a wife to such cruelty? against her husband. The victim Glenn Becker was 59 or 60 at the time of the 2011 incident. A Caucasian American, he was described as kind and considerate. Before marrying Catherine, Glenn had been married to Manal Salomon for 8 years, divorcing in 2002. Salomon, devastated by the news, described her ex-husband as a truly good man who cared deeply for his wife. To those who knew him, Glenn was gentle and attentive. After years of being single, Glenn met Catherine Q. Some sources claimed they met at a gym, others say through a church community. Either way, sparks flew quickly. They married in late 2009 when Catherine was 46 and Glenn around 56, with no children. Together early on, their life in the Flower Street apartment seemed peaceful. Glenn had his own job and social circle, even engaging with the Vietnamese community through his wife, occasionally attending church together. Friends noted his calm, soft-spoken nature, but by mid-2011 their marriage deteriorated. Glenn filed for divorce in May, likely feeling the relationship was beyond repair. Catherine was devastated and enraged by her husband's decision to leave. Notably, during the divorce proceedings, Glenn rekindled a relationship with an old girlfriend. Investigators later determined this affair sparked Catherine's blinding jealousy for Glenn. It may have been a pursuit of new happiness after a failed marriage, but it unwittingly ignited a tragedy. Forced to cohabitate due to financial constraints, the couple's home became a pressure cooker. Frequent arguments erupted, even over trivial matters like the dispute about a friend staying over the night of the crime. After surviving the attack, Glenn faced profound physical and emotional scars. Physically, he lost his male function entirely, forced to live without intimacy for the rest of his life. Psychologically, he suffered from PTSD and severe depression. At trial, he described an overwhelming sense of loss, stating he could never be fully happy again. He likened his pain to a life sentence inflicted by his wife, a haunting testament to the enduring torment far outlasting any prison sentence the perpetrator might face. Immediately after the incident, Garden Grove police launched a thorough investigation. This wasn't a complex whodunit mystery. The perpetrator, Catherine Koo, was unmistakably the wife. Yet authorities needed to unravel the chilling precision of the crime and the true motives behind such a barbaric act. At the scene, investigators collected critical evidence: ropes used to bind the victim, a 10-in blood-stained kitchen knife found near the bed, the weapon of the crime in the kitchen sink. Police recovered fragments of the victim's severed male organ in the garbage disposal, along with leftover food from the table. Blood tests confirmed the presence of ambient, a sedative, in Glenn's system, proving he was drugged before the attack. The crime scene was meticulously preserved, with photos taken and blood samples collected for forensic analysis. Most disturbingly, a search of the bedroom uncovered a hidden voice-activated recorder. Catherine had deliberately recorded the entire assault, capturing a chilling audio. The tape became a pivotal piece of evidence. Catherine's voice is heard shouting, "You deserve it," 3 times, followed by Glenn's agonized screams. Then came the gruesome sound of the garbage disposal grinding. This recording unequivocally proved Catherine's calm intent, demolishing any claim that the act was a spontaneous outburst of anger. Her decision to record the crime suggested a desire to preserve her act of vengeance, or to teach her husband a lesson, further exposing her calculated cruelty. Catherine Q was arrested at the scene and taken to Orange County Jail, held on a staggering $1 million bail, a figure reflecting the severity of the charges. At the police station, the Vietnamese American woman was uncooperative, remaining silent during questioning and coldly repeating that her husband deserved it. Lieutenant Jeff Nightingale, spokesperson for the Garden Grove Police Department, noted that initially no one knew why Catherine had committed such an act, or whether it was premeditated or impulsive. However, investigators soon leaned toward the conclusion that this was a meticulously planned crime aimed at inflicting maximum pain and permanent damage, not a momentary loss of control. Nightingale himself admitted this is Horrific and appalling. We're working to determine if this woman's savage act was premeditated to rob her husband of a vital part of his body and cause him unbearable physical and emotional suffering. The motive began to crystallize as police gathered statements from those involved. Glenn, having survived the critical ordeal, recounted the events: the argument over a friend staying over eating dinner and then succumbing to sudden exhaustion, leaving him vulnerable to his wife's attack. He confirmed the ongoing divorce proceedings and admitted to reconnecting with an ex-girlfriend, which deeply upset and enraged Catherine. Neighbors and friends provided further insight, confirming the couple's strained relationship and Catherine's controlling, jealous behavior. A neighbor across the street recalled seeing police cars and ambulances clogging the road that night. The next morning, media frenzy erupted, with headlines shocking the public. This is only the second time we've heard of a wife doing this to her husband out of jealousy. It's terrifying, a neighbor told reporters, visibly shaken within days. Authorities compiled a robust case against Catherine Q, supported by overwhelming evidence. The charges were extensive: aggravated mayhem, torture, poisoning, false imprisonment, assault with a deadly weapon, administering drugs to commit a felony, and spousal abuse. The core charges, torture and aggravated mayhem, reflected the intent to cause permanent harm with compelling evidence. The California grand jury indicted Catherine Q on January 4, 2012. Bypassing a preliminary hearing due to the case's clear foundation, prosecutors and authorities concluded that Catherine's motives stemmed from blind jealousy and a thirst for revenge. Furious that her husband sought a divorce to reunite with an ex-lover, she aimed to teach him a lesson he'd never forget by stripping him of his manhood. The attack occurred exactly 2 months after Glenn filed for divorce, underscoring its deliberate, vengeful nature. During the investigation, Catherine countered with allegations that she was the victim, claiming emotional and sexual abuse by Glenn, claims to be debated at trial. However, investigators believe Catherine was the calculated orchestrator, methodically executing the crime, from preparing the sedative and ropes to recording the act and mutilating her husband. Lieutenant Nightingale compared the case to the infamous 1993 Lorena Bobbitt case, where a wife similarly mutilated her husband. In my 22 years on the force, this is only the second time I've seen something this horrific since Lorena Bobbitt, he said. While the Bobbitt case was framed as a reaction to domestic abuse, with Lorena claiming she acted in a panicked state, Catherine Q's crime stood apart: a calculated act of torture driven by jealousy, not a typical domestic violence scenario. With a solid investigation, the case moved to trial, leaving the public eager to see how the courtroom drama would unfold, especially with Catherine's claims of being abused. Would they hold up as a mitigating factor, or were they a defense tactic? The truth would emerge in the gripping trial ahead. Catherine Q. Becker, possibly born Tran, entered the world on March 10, 1963 in Vietnam. Her childhood unfolded amid the chaos of the Vietnam War, marked by turmoil and hardship. She later claimed to have suffered abuse and assault as a young girl in her homeland, leaving deep psychological scars. While it's unclear when she immigrated to the U.S., Catherine was part of the Vietnamese diaspora, building new lives in California. By her late 40s, she had settled in Orange County. Working as a real estate agent, to outsiders Catherine appeared unassuming. Petite, at about 5 feet 1 inch, and reserved, and with no criminal record, she lived quietly, occasionally attending church. No one could have imagined this soft-spoken middle-aged woman capable of such a monstrous act. In her personal life, Catherine had been married before meeting Glenn, though details about her prior husband are scarce. In 2009, she married Glenn Becker, a decade her senior. Their marriage, lasting just over a year, grew strained as Catherine's jealousy and controlling nature surfaced. Possibly shaped by past abandonment or trauma, she developed an intense emotional dependence on Glenn when he grew distant and proposed divorce. Her mental state unraveled. Friends noted her suspicions of Glenn's infidelity and her fear of being left alone in her later years. These emotions festered into rage and a desire for retribution. Catherine alleged that during their marriage Glenn forced her into painful perverse sexual acts and verbally demeaned her. No independent evidence has fully substantiated these claims. They may hold some truth or could have been exaggerated to justify her actions. What's clear is that learning of Glenn's renewed contact with an ex-girlfriend pushed Catherine over the edge. Catherine's defense attorney argued that her mental state had fractured from reality at the time of the crime, claiming she was gripped by a psychotic episode fueled by deep trauma and overwhelming jealousy. However, the chilling sequence of events told a different story. She deliberately purchased sleeping pills, carefully timed her attack, and set up a voice-activated recorder. These cold, calculated actions revealed that Catherine Q was fully aware of her deeds, not acting in an unconscious daze. While awaiting trial at age 50, she became a media sensation, branded with lurid headlines like "The Wife Who Mutilated Her Husband." Western outlets drew parallels to Lorena Bobbitt, the American woman notorious for a similar act in 1993. Unlike Bobbitt, who was acquitted due to prior abuse by her husband, Catherine faced grave charges with little leniency from a criminal psychology perspective. Experts suggested she suffered from a Junfo syndrome, a toxic blend of blind jealousy and unresolved trauma that transformed her into a ruthless perpetrator. In her moment of vengeance, she seemed convinced that Glenn deserved excruciating punishment. Her aim wasn't to send him to the grave, evidenced by her 911 call, to save him, but to condemn him to a life of torment. This rare extreme psychological profile in women underscored a profound distortion driven by festering resentment. The trial commenced in April 2013 at the Orange County Superior Court in California. Catherine, pleading not guilty, faced a jury tasked with judging her heinous act. The case's shocking rarity and brutality captivated American and international audiences. Led by Deputy District Attorney John Crystal, the prosecution painted a stark portrait of a vengeful wife driven by jealousy to utterly destroy her husband's manhood. Crystal detailed her methodical cruelty, drugging Glenn with Ambien, binding him to the bed, severing his male organ and grinding it in the garbage disposal. Acts of unparalleled savagery. This woman went to every length to annihilate his masculinity. Crystal declared her actions stemmed from envy, vanity, and spiteful jealousy. Prosecutors argued her motive was unmistakable fury over Glenn's rekindled romance with an ex-girlfriend and his filing for divorce. They presented a compelling chain of evidence: the divorce papers, the argument that fateful night, traces of Ambien and Glenn's system, the ropes, the bloodied knife, and the hidden recorder. The trial's most harrowing moment came when the audio was played in court. The room fell silent as Catherine's voice screamed, "You deserve it," 3 times, followed by Glenn's agonized cries and the chilling grind of the disposal. Jurors recoiled at her callous demeanor. Crystal asserted she committed torture not to kill but to rob Glenn of everything but his life, leaving him permanently maimed. She stripped him of all but his breath, he said, urging the severest punishment under the law. In contrast, Catherine's defense, led by public defender Frank Bitter, portrayed her as a victim of a tragic life and her husband's cruelty. Bitter told the jury that Catherine suffered from mental disorders rooted in childhood abuse in Vietnam, traumas that remained unhealed. After her immigration to America, in her marriage to Glenn, she endured months of alleged sexual and verbal abuse, including demands for painful, perverse acts that tormented her physically and emotionally. Vidar argued that on the night of the crime she was detached from reality, overwhelmed by accumulated pain and jealousy. He urged the jury to view her act as a momentary lapse, not deliberate torture or mayhem, and sought a reduced charge of assault driven by emotional distress. The trial unfolded over days, laden with raw emotional testimony. Glenn took the stand, Confronting his former wife, his voice quivering as he relived that night's horror, he described the searing physical pain and devastating psychological trauma, stating, "She killed me that night," implying his life was irrevocably shattered. He admitted to battling despair but was striving to recover, though "I'll never be whole again." His words moved many in the courtroom to tears, making it difficult for the jury to empathize with Catherine's defense. On April 29, 2013, the jury delivered its verdict. Catherine Q was guilty of torture and aggravated mayhem. Convicted on all major charges, she sat silently, head bowed, as the decision was read. Under California law, the torture charge carried a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. On June 28, 2013, the court sentenced her to life with the possibility of after a minimum of 7 years. This offered a theoretical chance for release, but in practice parole was unlikely, effectively equating to a lifelong sentence. Glenn, present at sentencing, stated, "I hope this is the last time I ever see her." He expressed partial relief that justice served, but called it still a sad day as it reopened his wounds. Judge Richard F. Toohey underscored the crime's brutality. "In my 24 years on the bench, I've seen many murders. Her calculated, cold and heartless act was no different from first-degree murder. This framed her actions as akin to premeditated killing." Despite Glenn's survival, prosecutor Crystal, satisfied with the outcome, said the perpetrator deserves life for what she inflicted. He added somberly that Glenn was the one truly serving a life sentence, forced to live with the consequences. Catherine was transferred to the Central California Women's Facility (CCWF) to begin her prison term. Records show her behavior in custody as average, with scant details released given the severity of her torture. Conviction. Public sentiment holds that early parole is highly improbable. The Catherine Q. Becker case sent shockwaves through the public and media, from the US to Vietnam, where newspapers and TV shows dissected it from every angle. On the talk, host Sharon Osbourne sparked outrage by joking about the crime, calling it intriguing, prompting widespread backlash for trivializing violence. Co-host Sarah Gilbert condemned this as a double standard, noting that no one would laugh if a woman were similarly mutilated. This ignited broader discussions about societal views on gendered violence, revealing how violence against men is often downplayed, a bias that demands change in the Vietnamese community. The case became a cautionary tale about jealousy's dark side, with Catherine labeled a modern Hone Thursday, symbolizing how unchecked envy can turn human into monster. The case highlighted that domestic violence devastates regardless of gender. While society often focuses on women as victims, this showed men like Glenn deserve equal compassion and protection. Unresolved questions remain, such as whether Catherine truly suffered abuse from Glenn. The court acknowledged her possible trauma but deemed her vengeful act unjustifiable. If she was abused, the tragedy deepens. Instead of seeking legal or community aid, she became a criminal, destroying both Glenn's life and her own. This underscores the danger of untreated psychological distress, which can lead to unthinkable crimes. Conversely, if her abuse claims were fabricated, the case starkly illustrates how personal hatred and selfishness can drive extreme evil. Unable to accept Glenn's departure, Catherine chose the most barbaric retaliation, defying law and humanity. The result: 2 lives ruined, Glenn living in torment, Catherine stripped of freedom and future. This case sounds an alarm about the need to control emotions and resolve marital conflicts healthfully. Jealousy is natural, but unchecked it becomes a psychological poison. Catherine's story shows how far hatred can erode humanity. The lesson in strained relationships, especially marriages, seek legal counsel, therapy, or support from loved ones. Violence is never a solution, it only breeds tragedy. Legally, Catherine's harsh sentence affirmed justice without gender bias. Despite her claims of abuse, the court's firm ruling reflected undeniable evidence of a deliberate, heinous crime. This signaled that the legal system exists to punish the guilty and protect victims regardless of gender or circumstance. If Glenn wronged her in marriage, his faults didn't justify such extra-legal brutality. Catherine transformed from a wife into a criminal, sacrificing her career, dignity and future. Now over a decade later, she remains behind bars while Glenn lives quietly, avoiding the public scrutiny. His physical scars have healed, but his emotional wounds may never fully mend. As he said, "My whole life never whole again." This case closes a stark warning of the catastrophic consequences of violence born from jealousy. It reminds us that empathy, timely psychological support and legal recourse can prevent such tragedies. Story 2. In July 2008, as China raced to put the final touches on preparations for the Beijing Olympics, a brutal murder in Shanghai sent shockwaves through the nation and beyond, casting a dark shadow over the global spotlight. The victim was a young Canadian model, savagely killed in an apartment complex with 22 stab wounds to her body at the age of 22. The crime scene was so horrific it left even seasoned investigators shaken. What made the case even more perplexing was this: she had been in China for just over 10 days, had no known romantic entanglements, no enemies, and the door to her apartment remained locked and undisturbed. So who could have committed such a vicious act, and what was the motive behind this heinous crime? It was a sweltering Monday morning in July, the scorching Shanghai sun beating down as the city roared to life with blaring car horns and throngs of commuters flooding the subway stations. Amid the bustling crowds, a tall blonde woman moved gracefully through the streets. Her face bore traces of fatigue, her attire simple yet striking, her beauty turning heads wherever she went. Her name was Charlotte, a Canadian model. The night before, she had stayed up late watching movies at a friend's place and was eager to return home to rest. She quickened her pace toward her residence at Jinan Tower, located at 488 Xiaohua Road in Chongqing District. The 19-story Jinshan Tower stood tucked away in a quiet alley encircled by rusted black iron fences, in stark contrast to the frenetic construction sites transforming Shanghai into a sprawling urban jungle. This place felt oddly serene, lined with lush green trees and guarded by a 24/7 security post at its entrance. Charlotte shared apartment 602 with her colleague Diana. Though the building had 2 elevators, Charlotte, disciplined as a professional model, preferred the stairs to stay fit. Little did she know that this routine choice would lead her straight into a nightmare that morning. As she climbed the dimly lit stairwell between the 4th and 5th floors, Charlotte froze. A dark figure loomed ahead, peering closer. She nearly screamed in horror. A woman with long hair lay face down on the ground, motionless. Blood was everywhere, smeared on the floor, splattered on the walls, soaking the woman's body. The gruesome scene sent Charlotte into a panic. She turned and fled, racing down to the 1st floor and bursting into the security office. Frantically gesturing and shouting, she tried to explain to the middle-aged guard, "There's a woman lying in a pool of blood on the stairs." In her panic, Charlotte instinctively described the woman as Chinese, though she hadn't clearly seen her face. But the guard couldn't understand her. Desperate, Charlotte decided to return to the 6th floor to fetch Diana, hoping they could figure out what to do together. But when the elevator doors opened on the 6th floor, Charlotte froze again. A large smeared pool of blood stained the hallway floor right in front of their apartment door. The crimson trail stretched from the door to the stairwell and down to the 5th floor. In that moment, a chilling realization hit Charlotte. The woman lying in the stairwell might well be her roommate Diana. The horrific scene, straight out of a horror film, pushed Charlotte to the edge of sanity. She frantically pressed the elevator button, rushed back to the ground floor, and with trembling hands called a Chinese friend, screaming, "Someone's been hurt, I think it's Diana." When the police arrived, they quickly confirmed the victim was indeed Diana Gabriel O'Brien. Charlotte's roommate Diana had been stabbed 22 times and died on the stairwell of the Ginchen Tower. It was only her 12th day in Shanghai before arriving in China. Diana knew little about the country or what her job would entail. In many ways she had been misled into coming here like Charlotte Diana hailed from British Columbia, Canada, but her childhood was something out of a fairy tale. Diana was born in Winnipeg at 14. Her family moved to the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia after her parents separated. Her mother took Diana and her two siblings to live on the islands near Vancouver. For years they lived on an 11m sailboat anchored off Cortes Island, a remote community of about 700 people. There were no police, no shopping malls, and no one locked their doors. Locals left vegetables outside their homes for others to take with small jars for spare change. Diana's childhood was filled with foraging for mushrooms in the forest, walking pets, swimming and dancing. Her family had no TV, no calendar. Sometimes they didn't even know what day it was. When Diana entered high school, her mother moved the family to Salt Spring Island, a slightly larger community. Life remained simple. Every Saturday the small harbor hosted a market selling handmade goods, wool, earrings, clothing. Local vendors often needed models for photos, and Diana became their go-to island model. Diana wasn't just passionate about modeling, she had the perfect attributes. 1.75 meters tall, slender yet toned, with a radiant smile and clear, vibrant eyes. Raised in the wilderness, she carried the resilient spirit of a wildflower blooming through cracks and stone. In 2007, Diana applied to Cultish Management, the only modeling agency in Victoria, and was quickly signed. A few months later she landed her first international contract, traveling to Milan for a still photography modeling job. Those 3 months broadened her horizons and fueled her determination to pursue modeling professionally. However, after returning to Canada, no new contracts came her way. Then in the spring of 2008, Centimeters presented her with an opportunity to work in China. The agency told her Jia, an international modeling agency in Shanghai, has reached out. They're a new company eager for Western models. This could be a great stepping stone. When Diana researched JY's website, she found a seemingly professional Taiwanese-funded agency claiming partnerships with European companies and collaborations with major fashion magazines like Vogue, Elle and Harper's Bazaar. It looked legitimate. The agency added, "We already have a model, Charlotte, working there. She's even been on the cover of Vogue." Knowing a colleague had paved the way gave Diana some reassurance, though she hesitated, having never been to China, and knowing no Mandarin. The agency reassured her the modeling industry in China is just taking off, so new companies are popping up, and that means more opportunities for newcomers. This wasn't entirely untrue, since China joined the WTO in 2001. Western brands, magazines and aesthetics had flooded the market. International style was in high demand. Products endorsed by blonde, blue-eyed foreign models could command a premium, what some called the appearance tax. To meet this demand, modeling agencies sprouted up rapidly, but there was a darker side that Canadian agencies often overlooked. Regulation of these agencies in China was virtually non-existent, leading to rampant issues. Some unscrupulous agencies overworked models, schemed their pay, or threatened hefty fines for contract breaches. Worse, some forced models to promote alcohol in nightclubs or perform in risque shows. The parent agency in Canada, meant to protect its models, often took the Chinese agency's paperwork at face value, unaware of the hidden risks. In June 2008, Diana signed a 3-month contract with GA. The terms stated her earnings would be split 10% to CM, 30% to GA and 10% to Chinese taxes. Before even starting, half her income was already gone. Still, Diana didn't dwell on it, valuing the chance to gain experience and explore a vast new country. At the time, modeling wasn't listed as a profession eligible for a legal work visa in China. To enter the country, Diana had to lie to consular officials, claiming she was a tourist eager to see the Great Wall and the Oriental Pearl Tower. She initially expected a multiple entry visa valid for a year, but due to some unspecified issue, she received only a single entry 30-day tourist visa. JA, his representative, assured her they could extend it in China if needed. On June 24, 2008 Diana arrived at Shanghai's Hongqiao Airport. A driver sent by Jia He took her to Jinan Tower at 488 Xiaohua Road, Chongqing District, where she would share a company dorm with Charlotte. The apartment was spacious with 3 bedrooms and a balcony, but it was run down, outdated facilities, sparse furniture and broken appliances. It wasn't free either. Each paid $360 Canadian, approximately $275 US per month, a steep price for the conditions, though the accommodations disappointed the 2 young women. Far from home, quickly bonded, ready to support each other through the challenges ahead. 3 days after arriving, Jia assigned Diana her first job. Excited at first, she was stunned upon arrival. It wasn't a magazine shoot or a fashion show, but a gig promoting whiskey at a nightclub in a second-tier city while not required to entertain clients. The job was a far cry from the professional fashion work she'd done in Milan, leaving her deeply shaken. Subsequent jobs followed a similar pattern, wearing dresses and dancing at bar openings, restaurant launches, or product promotions, enduring leering crowds and whispered gossip. Diana felt deceived, overwhelmed with frustration. She vented to her boyfriend and close friends in Canada, saying she wanted to return home immediately, but the contract's hefty penalty for early termination stopped her from acting impulsively. After some reflection, her 30-day tourist visa became her only safe exit strategy. On July 3, 2008, her 9th day in Shanghai, Diana contacted Air Canada to change her flight, rescheduling her return for July 24, the day her visa expired 2 months earlier than planned. She didn't inform GA or CM, sharing her plans only with family and friends who eagerly awaited her return. Tragically, just 3 days after changing her ticket, Diana was found dead in the stairwell of the Jinsan Tower. In the summer of 2008, China was feverishly preparing for 2 landmark events, the Beijing Olympics and the Shanghai World Expo 2010, with the world's eyes on the nation. The brutal murder of a Canadian model stabbed over 20 times in the heart of Shanghai sent shockwaves through domestic and international media. The case, dubbed the Diana murder case, became an immediate focal point, placing immense pressure on the Shanghai police. A special task force was urgently formed to investigate. The task force swiftly reconstructed the timeline of events surrounding Diana's death. On that Sunday afternoon, Diana had just completed a job promoting whiskey in Kunming and caught a flight back to Shanghai. Landing around 7 p.m. from the airport, she went straight to her apartment. That evening, Diana, Charlotte and another model friend dined at a Middle Eastern restaurant near their complex. After dinner, Charlotte invited the group to a friend's place to watch movies, but Diana, exhausted, declined and returned home alone. Security footage captured Diana leaving the apartment just after 10 p.m. and returning at 10:50 p.m. Based on items in the refrigerator, police believed she had gone to a nearby supermarket around 11:30 p.m. Several neighbors reported hearing screams from the hallway lasting 1 to 2 minutes before falling silent. Assuming it was a lover's quarrel, no one investigated this. Police later surmised was likely the moment Diana was attacked. The crime scene was chaotic. Blood coated the inner doorknob of the apartment, with droplets and splatters scattered across the floor near the entrance. Bloody footprints stained the living room's tiled floor, and traces of blood speckled the kitchen. In Diana's bedroom, the bed sheets near the headboard were soaked red. Her belongings were ransacked. A white wallet containing cash was missing from the bed. Her phone was found under the bed, and faint white blood stains marred the wardrobe. In a travel bag from the evidence, police deduced that Diana wasn't initially attacked in the stairwell. She was likely first assaulted in the living room, then fled to her bedroom, attempting to lock the door to keep her attacker out, but failed. In the bedroom, she was stabbed repeatedly, leaving significant blood stains. Despite her injuries, she managed to stagger out of the apartment, only to be overtaken and killed in the stairwell. A critical detail caught the police's attention: the Killer hadn't entered through a window or balcony but via the front door, which showed no signs of forced entry. The team investigated Diana's personal connections but quickly ruled out anyone she knew having been in Shanghai for only a few days. Diana had no local acquaintances and spent much of her time traveling for work. Charlotte, her roommate, had a solid alibi for the time of the murder. Charlotte told police that Diana, hailing from a tranquil island, had a carefree, somewhat careless personality. One of her bad habits was leaving the apartment door ajar when she returned home, often requiring Charlotte to close it for her despite repeated reminders. Diana never changed this habit. Additionally, though the building boasted a 24/7 security sign, the guard post was frequently unmanned. Police hypothesized that on the night of the murder, the door to apartment 602 was likely unlocked, allowing the killer to slip inside unnoticed. The question remained, who was the killer in a sprawling, crowded city like Shanghai? Identifying a random intruder seemed like finding a needle in a haystack. Fortunately, the building had a single entrance and nearby surveillance cameras offered hope. After reviewing footage, police identified a suspicious individual at 11:03 p.m. on July 6. Cameras recorded a man wearing a black jacket, black pants and white shoes entering Diana's building. Roughly 40 minutes later, he left hurriedly. His jacket's right shoulder appeared torn with visible stains, but he carried nothing, showing no signs of theft. Expanding their review of surveillance footage, police uncovered a crucial detail. At 3:57 a.m. the same man reappeared below the building, this time on a bicycle, circling as if scouting the area. At 4:06 a.m. he entered the building, again staying for about 30 minutes. When he left, he was carrying a suitcase. Charlotte immediately recognized it as Diana's. The police concluded this man was undeniably linked to the crime. Meanwhile, forensic analysis revealed the harrowing ordeal Diana endured that night. She wore a t-shirt and a floral skirt. There were no signs of sexual assault. Her body bore 22 stab wounds, most superficial, likely from struggling, but several deep wounds pierced her chest, liver and heart. The murder weapon was a sharp single-edged blade about 2 centimeters wide and at least 8 centimeters long. Diana didn't die immediately. She crawled out of the apartment seeking help but collapsed after 2 or 3 steps in the stairwell due to massive blood loss. Her time of death was estimated between 11:00 p.m. and early morning. The case showed no signs of coercion or personal vengeance. If it was a robbery, the extreme violence was unusual. So who was the killer, and why was he in Diana's building? As the investigation hit a deadlock, an unexpected clue emerged. A local officer reported that at 11:55 p.m. that night, the 110 emergency line received an anonymous call from a payphone at the dingy road intersection. A man with an Anhui accent claimed he heard a foreigner's cries for help near the Jew Bridge, then hung up. Police dispatched a patrol to the area near Jensen Tower, but inquiries with nearby security guards yielded no reports of anything unusual. The call was initially dismissed as a prank and not pursued further. In hindsight, police theorized the killer himself made the call, perhaps driven by fleeting guilt to alert authorities, yet fearing capture he deliberately gave a vague location. This half-hearted attempt at redemption led to a futile rescue effort. However, the caller overlooked a critical detail. The police could use the call to infer his familiarity with the area, as he accurately named the street. His return to the scene twice by bicycle and on foot suggested he lived nearby. The investigation shifted focus to Jawa Road, targeting migrant workers with an accent. A breakthrough came at a nearby tea house called Hwaji Lin, which Diana had visited for tea when alive. The owner, after viewing the surveillance footage, said the man resembled a former waiter named Qinxing from Anhui who had recently arrived in Shanghai. According to the owner, Qinxing had previously worked at a children's clothing factory in Huzhou before joining the tea house. Fired for laziness and insubordination, he had submitted a copy of his ID listing his hometown as Lanchi County on Hue. The task force contacted Lanchi County Police only to learn no record of Chin Zing existed. This suggested Chin Zing's ID was fake, a common practice at the time, as migrant workers often forged documents to bypass age restrictions or other regulations. The name Chin Zing might be an alias, or he wasn't from Lanchi County. The lead from the ID stalled. Then investigators sent to Huzhou returned with promising news. A local officer recognized the man in the fake ID photo as someone who had worked at a children's clothing factory there. 4 current factory workers confirmed his identity. His real name was Chin Jun, from Shi's town, Lanchi County on Hue. Chin Jun was an abandoned child from a small town left behind by parents who migrated for work. Dropping out of school at 15, he followed in their footsteps, taking up odd jobs far from home. At the time of the crime, Chin Jun was just 18. Over a few years he drifted from job to job, never staying long. In May 2008 he arrived alone in Shanghai, chasing dreams of a better life in the glittering metropolis in Shanghai. Chin Jun used fake documents to land a job as a waiter at a tea house, earning a meager $140 a month. The monotony and hardship of his life soon drove him to escape into the virtual world of internet cafes, where he immersed himself in action-packed video games filled with tales of revenge and underworld exploits. Obsessed, he neglected his job, leading to his dismissal by the tea house owner. After losing his job, Chin Jun didn't leave the Zio Road area. Instead, he holed up in an internet cafe above the tea house, squandering his last dollars on gaming, according to a November 2008 Shinanoa News report. As the task force neared the end of its investigation, the People's Procuratorate approved an arrest warrant and coordinated a manhunt. Just 4 days after the murder, Chin Jun was apprehended at an internet cafe on the ground floor of a small guest house. When police approached, Chin Jun seemed to know why they were there. Without resistance, he confessed to killing Diana, an ordinary young man from a small town living in the shadows of the city. Had been tracked down through grainy surveillance footage. Chin Jun was the killer they sought. Chin Jun admitted that after being fired he planned to return home but had no money, not even enough for a train ticket. Desperate, he turned to theft. Shanghai was full of wealthy people, he reasoned. Stealing or robbing a few $100 and fleeing wouldn't be difficult. In his selfish, short-sighted logic, such a small sum would mean nothing to the rich. Some might not even bother reporting it. He didn't target anyone specific, instead prowling apartments for easy opportunities. Familiar with Jinshan Tower from his time working nearby, he chose it as his target. The building's main entrance was wide open, the security post unmanned, allowing Chin Jun to slip inside and climb the floors, searching for a chance to strike. On the 6th floor he found apartment 602's door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, he spotted a white Apple laptop on the living room sofa. Certain it was valuable as he prepared to steal it, Diana emerged from her bedroom, alerted by a noise. Unfazed at first, she asked in English who he was and why he was in her apartment. Unable to understand, Chin Jun panicked, assuming he'd been caught. He pulled out a spring-loaded knife, pointed it at her and demanded money. Only then did Diana realize she was being robbed. Screaming in terror, in a frenzy, Chin Jun lunged and stabbed her in the stomach. Diana fought back fiercely, fleeing to her bedroom and trying to lock the door. When that failed, she ran into the hallway screaming for help. Her cries only heightened Chin Jun's panic. He chased her from the 6th floor to the 5th, stabbing her repeatedly in a blind rage until she collapsed motionless. Unsure if she was alive, he fled the scene in a panic. Outside the complex, fear consumed him, whether he worried that a surviving Diana could identify him or dreaded the weight of a murder. He impulsively called 110, reporting of foreigners for help near Jinsan Tower. After the anonymous call, he hid out at the nearby Oriental Network Internet cafe. Hours later he returned to the building, circling on a bicycle to see if police had responded. Finding no activity, He re-entered apartment 602. This time Chin Jun rifled through Diana's wallet. Tearing out the lining for cash before tossing it back on the bed, he gathered anything valuable: Charlotte's laptop and camera, Diana's phone, a Polaroid camera and some jewelry. Stuffing them into a suitcase, he held a taxi to escape to a working-class area in southern Shanghai. Spending another night in an internet cafe, the next day he boarded a bus with the suitcase, fleeing the city 6 days. After Diana's murder, her mother Deborah and stepfather Keith arrived in Shanghai. Accompanied by a Canadian embassy translator, they saw Diana one last time lying silently amid flowers. Seeing her daughter's body riddled with stab wounds, especially deep cuts on her fingers from trying to fend off the blade with her bare hands, Deborah collapsed in tears at Shanghai's crematorium. Deborah chose a simple polished rosewood urn unadorned, reflecting Diana's pure spirit. Before leaving China, Deborah and Keith visited the Lin Huajati house where Chin Jun had worked. They noticed its back door faced an alley leading directly to Ginchen Tower with a clear view of Diana's balcony. Deborah had a chilling realization: Chun might have watched the apartment while smoking in the alley, assuming the two foreign women were wealthy. Perhaps that night, seeing Diana leave to shop and believing the apartment empty, he decided to break in, only for her to return unexpectedly. Deborah believed Chin Jun had targeted her daughter, though it remained a haunting speculation, unable to change the tragic outcome. On November 17, 2008, the Shanghai No. 1 Intermediate People's Court held a public trial. Chin Jun's courtroom testimony differed from his initial police confession. He claimed he hadn't intended to harm Diana, saying she kicked him first. Upon discovering him in the apartment angered, he stabbed her once. When he tried to flee, she blocked him, leading to an accidental second stab. As Diana screamed and ran, he chased her, fearing neighbors would hear, and in a loss of control stabbed her repeatedly throughout. Chin Jun framed each attack as a reaction, not a deliberate act, as if his crimes were involuntary. His defense lawyer emphasized his youth, only 18, and noted that after fleeing he called police, suggesting an intent to save Diana, and requested leniency. The prosecutor countered that Chin Jun's vague call hindered any rescue, and his return to the scene was to steal, not help. He saw Diana bleeding out but did nothing. Could that be called an intent to save? In a final effort, the defense requested a psychiatric evaluation, but the court rejected it for lack of justification. The prosecution's indictment was clear: Chin Jun, with the intent to steal, used lethal force, robbing and killing Diana. Under Chinese criminal law, this constituted robbery resulting in death, warranting the harshest penalty. The procurator had sought the death penalty with lifelong deprivation of political rights. After 2 hours, Chin Jun pleaded guilty. The judge announced the later, under China's life for a life legal principle, the death penalty seemed likely. However, a unique aspect of China's justice system emerged: the victim's family's stance could influence the sentence. The judge privately asked Deborah and Keith, "What punishment do you want for him? Death, life imprisonment, or a term under 25 years?" Stunned, Deborah and Keith were unprepared. In North American courts, such a question was rare. They hadn't come for vengeance, only to understand why a stranger killed their daughter with 22 stab wounds. After a long silence, they requested a suspended death sentence, a choice many found incomprehensible. When an American reporter asked why, Deborah explained, "We've always opposed the death penalty. We believe people can change. Redemption is possible. A life isn't justice's endpoint. Sparing him is both restraint and faith." Deborah observed Chin Jun's family in the courtroom, humble farmers unable to speak a foreign language, standing quietly in the audience, visibly anxious and at a loss. Yet she was deeply troubled by Chin Jun's demeanor during the trial. His cold indifference to Diana's tragic death chilled her. He seemed not like a remorseful perpetrator but a detached bystander, a stance that filled her with dread. To Deborah, Chin Jun was both a villain and a mere speck caught in the whirlwind of a rapidly changing era. When individuals are torn from their roots driven by market forces and consumed by materialism tragedies. Like this multiply desperate for wealth but jobless some lose sight of morality. Caring only for survival, this erosion of humanity Deborah reflected is a dehumanizing process. She sensed a quiet empathy from the police and judge toward Chin Jun, not forgiveness but an understanding of the broader context. They saw not just a young man who committed a heinous act but a symptom of a society increasingly stratified by its own progress. In her most heart-wrenching statement, Deborah told a reporter, "We've lost our daughter but we don't wish another family to lose their child." Months later, the Shanghai No. 1 Intermediate Court sentenced Chen Jun to death with a 2-year reprieve at Diana's funeral in her hometown held on a serene golf course. Hundreds of locals gathered to bid farewell. Her ashes were interred in a cemetery behind a church nestled on a hillside surrounded by forest. Sunlight filtered through towering pines and a gentle breeze rustled the grass like a soft melody. No lavish statue adorned Diana's grave, instead mementos: a ceramic rabbit, a Buddha statue, a metal bird marked the site. At the center of her headstone was a photo, not a glamorous magazine shot, but a candid image of Diana's radiant smile framed by seashells and shimmering stones. Beside her picture, an inscription read, "Life is for loving and smiling." 2 years later, Keith, who loved Diana like his own daughter, passed away. Friends said his grief was too much to bear. Deborah carried on, though forever changed by the loss of her daughter and husband. Diagnosed with PTSD, she joined a support group but soon spent days bedridden, lost in memories of her daughter. The case led many to reflect on the eerie parallels between Chen Jun and Diana from vastly different worlds. Both were young, alone in a sprawling city. Diana, a glamorous foreign model; Chen Jun, a struggling laborer in a harsh reality. Ironically, both were ready to return home. Diana had booked her flight. Chen Jun had packed his bags, yet fate brought them together behind an unlocked door. His blade cut short her journey home and sealed his own destiny. The victim was an innocent, beautiful, kind-hearted young woman with a bright future. Her life tragically cut short. The perpetrator was a destitute youth discarded by society, whose poverty fueled his cruelty in a dazzling opulent city. Story 3. One was a brilliant PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology MIT, the other a master's student at Yale University. Both were exceptional individuals, seemingly unconnected until 8 gunshots shattered the stillness of the night, forever altering their destinies. The case we're exploring today sent shock waves through the Chinese American community, dominating headlines and sparking intense public debate. The American police were left grappling with a formidable challenge: a perpetrator with an exceptionally high IQ, meticulous in execution and cunningly elusive. The killer vanished without a trace immediately after the crime. To apprehend the suspect, law enforcement had to collaborate with multiple agencies, even enlisting the intervention of the International Criminal Police Organization Interpol, launching a massive manhunt that spanned months across the United States and extended globally. In the process, a heartbreaking truth began to unravel. You're watching True Crime in the world, where we delve into the most enigmatic cases and the most riveting stories. So what exactly is the story behind this case? Let's rewind to 2021 and revisit the full sequence of events as well as the deeper causes of this shocking shooting. New Haven, nestled in southern Connecticut, USA, is a city steeped in cultural heritage and the state's second largest urban center. Despite its picturesque landscapes, what truly sets New Haven apart is its crown jewel, Yale University, a globally renowned Ivy League institution. As one of America's oldest and most prestigious private research universities, Yale is not only a cornerstone of the Ivy League but also a towering symbol in global academia. To date, it has produced 68 Nobel laureates and 5 U.S. presidents, cementing its reputation as a cradle for exceptional talent. The story we're about to tell begins within the hallowed grounds of this illustrious institution. Kevin Jiang was a 26-year-old Chinese American known for his warmth, kindness and remarkable talent. He was pursuing a master's degree at Yale's School of the Environment and was on the cusp of graduation when the tragedy struck. Born on February 14, 1994 in Iowa, Kevin was the son of mining Jiang and Jinlu, both immigrants from China. He spent much of his childhood in Chicago. After his parents' divorce, he lived with his mother and became a devout Christian in 2012. With outstanding academic and personal achievements, Kevin earned admission to the University of Washington while also joining the U.S. Army National Guard. 4 years later, he graduated with honors, earning a bachelor's degree in environmental science. By 2019, he received an acceptance letter from Yale, embarking on a new chapter of his academic journey. During this time, he purchased a home in West Haven, just a 10-minute drive from Yale, and welcomed his mother to live with him. Kevin's days in New Haven were filled with purpose and joy. Beyond his studies, he actively participated in extracurricular activities, showcasing a particular gift for music and playing the piano. To his friends, he was warm, compassionate and brimming with energy. As a former soldier and a member of the National Guard Reserves, he embodied a spirit of discipline and service, volunteering regularly and cooking meals for the homeless whenever friends or anyone around him needed help. Kevin was there, giving selflessly without hesitation to everyone who knew him. Kevin was a truly dependable friend. In late January 2020, Kevin attended a church retreat in Norwalk, Connecticut. On the third day of the event, he noticed a young woman sitting next to him, sweet, captivating and instantly intriguing. They connected after praying for each other, and from that moment a remarkable bond quietly began to blossom. Her name was Zion Perry, a senior at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. Coincidentally, she hadn't planned to attend the retreat, only agreeing after persistent encouragement from a friend who jokingly suggested it could be a vacation with unexpected rewards. Little did they know that playful remark would prove prophetic. The two attended 2 more church events together, and though they'd only met 3 times, they stayed in constant contact online, their connection deepening rapidly. By May, they were officially dating. Kevin was utterly smitten with Perry, frequently driving to MIT to visit her, sharing meals, traveling together and creating countless cherished memories. In August 2020, after graduating from MIT, Perry enrolled at Yale to begin a PhD program through direct admission. At last, she and Kevin were in the same city. From the moment she arrived in New Haven, they were inseparable, exploring local landmarks and growing ever closer. Kevin's mother was overjoyed and wholeheartedly approved of her future daughter-in-law. On January 30, 2021, shortly after celebrating their 1-year anniversary, Kevin mustered the courage to propose to Perry amid the snowy beauty of East Rock Park. Without hesitation, she said yes. They shared their joyful moment on Facebook, receiving an outpouring of likes and congratulations from friends. Barring any unforeseen changes, they would soon walk down the aisle together. Filled with hope, they began planning their future. But just 1 week later, tragedy struck. A sudden shooting brought an abrupt end to all their dreams. At around 8:30 p.m. on February 6, 2021, the streets of New Haven were cloaked in silence. Snow blanketed the roads and few people were out. Suddenly, a barrage of gunshots tore through the frigid night. Hearing the shots, several neighbors immediately called the police. 15 minutes later, officers arrived at the scene, located at the intersection of Lawrence and Nickel Streets in the East Rock neighborhood. There, a silver Toyota Prius stood motionless in the middle of the road, its hazard lights still flashing. Not far away, a young man lay crumpled on the pavement in a pool of red, showing no signs of life. Preliminary findings revealed the victim had been struck by multiple bullets, including a fatal shot to the head. A burn mark from gunpowder on his left cheek indicated he was shot at close range. At the scene, police recovered 8.45 caliber shell casings. After identification, the victim was confirmed to be Kevin. The killer had acted with chilling precision and cunning, leaving no trace beyond the Shell casings. Multiple neighbors reported hearing the loud blasts, allowing police to gather statements and reconstruct the incident around 8:30 p.m. A dark colored SUV rear-ended Kevin's silver Toyota Prius. Kevin activated his hazard lights, stepped out of his car and approached the other vehicle to assess the situation. Unbeknownst to him, the driver opened fire, shooting him twice. But the assailant didn't flee immediately. He stepped out of his vehicle, fired 6 more shots into Kevin's fallen body, then drove off, disappearing into the night. Based on these accounts, police initially speculated that Kevin may have encountered a hot-tempered driver, leading to a fatal confrontation over a minor traffic incident. However, upon examining the damage to Kevin's car, this theory seemed implausible. The rear of the Toyota Prius bore only a faint scratch, barely noticeable unless closely inspected. The scratch suggested the front license plate of the vehicle might have been loose or misaligned. With such a minor collision, neither vehicle likely sustained significant damage. Under normal circumstances, this wouldn't provoke such a brutal response, especially without evidence of a heated argument. Police also obtained surveillance footage from a nearby camera capturing the entire shooting. Unfortunately, the footage was too blurry to identify the suspect's vehicle or the perpetrator's appearance. The only clear sounds were Kevin's agonizing screams before he collapsed, interspersed with the 8 deafening gunshots. Combining witness statements in the footage, it appeared the killer acted with deliberate intent. The initial 2 shots weren't enough to sate his rage, prompting him to fire 6 more. This didn't resemble a typical conflict. As mentioned earlier, Kevin was a warm and sociable student who never made enemies, making a personal vendetta unlikely. Robbery was equally improbable, as Kevin had little savings. A thief would likely target a wealthier victim. On the romantic front, Kevin and Perry were blissfully happy, having just gotten engaged, ruling out a jealousy-driven attack. After eliminating these possibilities, the case became increasingly perplexing. Police turned to Perry, Kevin's fiancée. Upon learning of his death, she was devastated, unable to fathom the cruel reality. Just hours earlier they were together. How could he be gone forever? Fighting back her grief, she recounted their day to the police. On February 6, we spent nearly the entire day together. We started by ice fishing at Silver Lake nearby. In the early evening we returned to the apartment for dinner, then stopped by a convenience store for some snacks. Around 8:20 p.m. after a lingering hug, he drove off alone. Who could have imagined that minutes later he'd meet such a tragic fate? The crime scene was just 2 blocks from my apartment, so I even heard the fateful gunshots clearly. At that point the police were at a dead end with no leads on the shooter. The investigation seemed stalled until a sudden tip opened a new avenue at 11:00 a.m. on February 7, just a day after the crime. An employee at an Arby's in North Haven frantically called the police, reporting the discovery of a gun and roughly 10 boxes of ammunition. When pressed for details, he clarified, "I found 3 bags discarded in the bushes near the restaurant. Inside were a handgun, several boxes of ammo, 7 magazines, and some other items." This critical information reignited the investigation, fueling determination to track down the killer. Officer Mills from the North Haven Police Department quickly arrived at the reported location. Upon seeing the items, he felt an uneasy premonition. Beyond the gun and ammunition, the bags contained a yellow jacket, a black briefcase, and a light-colored plastic bag, items that seemed strikingly familiar. Just the previous night, or more precisely early that morning, he had seen them around 9:00 p.m. on February 6, 2021. A security guard at a metal scrapyard in North Haven reported a vehicle trespassing onto their premises. The guard described a car driving erratically like a moth to a flame before getting stuck on an abandoned railway track no longer in use. The guard pursued the vehicle, which sped to the back of the facility, a small black truck or SUV. Given the freezing weather with snow and ice everywhere and the fact that the vehicle was merely stuck on an ice track, the incident wasn't deemed urgent. It wasn't until 5 hours later that Officer Mills and his colleague arrived to address the situation. There they found a Chinese-American man waiting anxiously by the tracks. He appeared calm, explaining that he had gotten lost and accidentally driven onto the railway. He asked for help to free his vehicle so he could return home. With no better solution, the police advised him to stay at a nearby hotel temporarily. During their interaction, Officer Mills noticed a yellow jacket on the passenger seat, a black briefcase and a light-colored plastic bag in the back. These items seemed unremarkable, raising no suspicion. The man was cooperative, composed, and provided valid identification with no other suspicious individuals in the vehicle at the time. News of Kevin's shooting hadn't reached the North Haven Police Department, thus they followed standard procedure, arranging a tow truck to move the dark green SUV license plate AE 33336 to the Best Western Hotel, where the man would only need to cover the towing fee. The matter seemed resolved until the next morning, when news of the New Haven shooting broke, followed by the report of the discarded weapon. Officer Mills realized these items likely belonged to the Chinese-American driver, who could be the killer. He immediately reported this to the New Haven Police Department. Both jurisdictions began working closely to track down the suspect. According to hotel staff, the man was staying in room 276 and hadn't checked out. Police rushed to the room only to find it empty, the bed pristine as if no one had stayed there. The SUV towed to the hotel was also gone without a trace. Clearly the suspect had fled. Fortunately, Officer Mills had recorded the man's driver's license information the previous night, enabling quick identification. Cheng Xianpan, a 30-year-old Chinese-American man, while the ammunition found matched the .45 caliber shell casings from the crime scene. Forensic analysis revealed that the Ruger semi-automatic handgun, also .45 caliber, was not the murder weapon. Combined with Officer Mills' observations, the evidence only amounted to suspicion without sufficient grounds for immediate legal action. Police could only deepen their investigation into Cheng Xianpan's background. As the investigation deepened, the police realized they were up against a formidable adversary. Cheng Xianpan's background was far from ordinary. He was a prodigy at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology (MIT), a PhD candidate in computer science. Born on April 16, 1991 in Shanghai, China, Pan immigrated with his family to Massachusetts, USA. From a young age he was renowned for his intelligence and dedication, consistently ranking at the top of his class. His teachers uniformly praised his exceptional abilities. In 2009, at just 18, Pan represented the United States at the International Mathematical Olympiad in Germany, earning a silver medal. This achievement opened a world of opportunities. He gained admission to MIT, majoring in computer science. After graduating, he pursued a PhD at the same institution, completing all required coursework and co-authoring several research papers with his advisor. He was just one step away from defending his dissertation to officially earn his doctorate. Beyond academics, he was a researcher at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory (CSIL). To his peers, Pan was undeniably a genius. With such an impeccable resume and extraordinary intellect, if Cheng Xianpan was indeed the killer, apprehending him would be no easy feat. Naturally, the priority was to locate Pan and clarify the truth, but he had vanished completely. His phone powered off despite Officer Mills recording the vehicle's license plate in vain. The plate was fake and the car's tracking system had been disabled. With no other leads, police visited Pan's family home in Massachusetts, where his parents resided. The house was empty. When contacted by phone, his parents claimed they were traveling and had no knowledge of their son's whereabouts at MIT. His professors and peers offered little useful information. Everyone described him as brilliant but reserved, socially withdrawn, with no criminal record. His Facebook account, last updated in 2016, was largely inactive among his friends. List police found no trace of the victim Kevin, suggesting the two were strangers. However, one name in Pan's friend list caught the police's attention: Zan Perry, Kevin's fiancée, as a former MIT student. It was unsurprising that Pan knew her, connecting the dots on January 30, 2021. Kevin proposed to Perry and shared their joy on Facebook. Just 1 week later he was killed. The coincidence was striking. This led to a bold hypothesis: Kevin's engagement may have enraged Pan, possibly due to a hidden romantic connection with Perry. If true, this would provide a clear motive to test this, police questioned Perry. She confirmed, "I do know Pan. We met at a school event in 2019, but it was a casual acquaintance, not even a friendship, let alone anything romantic." Further investigation revealed their last contact was in May 2020, when Pan messaged Perry to congratulate her on graduating. This seemed to rule out a romantic motive, plunging the case back into a dead end. At this point, the police could only focus on tracking Pan's whereabouts. On February 8, 2021, 3 days after the murder, Yale President Salvi, New Haven Mayor Alker, and police Chief Reyes held a press conference updating the public on the case and vowing to bring the perpetrator to justice. On February 10, in another press conference, the New Haven Police Department named Ching Swan Pan a person of interest. Chief Reyes warned the public that Pan was potentially armed and highly dangerous, urging extreme caution. The announcement stunned the public. The suspect was an MIT prodigy, the victim a Yale star. Speculation ran rampant, though police had gathered some evidence. They hadn't yet officially named Pan as the primary suspect. On February 11, 2021, a breakthrough emerged. Investigators found a dark green SUV abandoned in a deserted parking lot in Burford, Connecticut. Its misaligned front license plate matched the scratch on Kevin's car. DNA fingerprints and Officer Mills' testimony confirmed this was the vehicle Pan drove when it got stuck on the railway tracks early on February 7. The SUV and items from the Arby's find were sent for forensic analysis. Chin Swan Pan's name was added to the U.S. Marshal Service's fugitive task force list, triggering a nationwide manhunt with a $10,000 reward for information leading to his capture. Knowing the fugitive was an MIT prodigy, the police felt immense pressure. Pan proved cunning. All three of his phones were inactive and his bank and credit cards showed no transactions. Police suspected someone was covertly aiding his escape, with his parents Hao Fan and Hong Huang as the most likely accomplices. Investigators shifted focus to Pan's parents. They discovered that post-murder Pan had contacted them on February 11, 2021 at Donna, Georgia. Store surveillance captured Hao Fan and a man suspected to be Pan. Due to COVID-19 mask mandates, identification was inconclusive. Police located Pan's parents in Georgia. During questioning, they claimed ignorance of their son's situation, stating he called for help, prompting them to drive to Connecticut to pick him up. They said he left alone without revealing his destination. Police suspected they were secretly assisting his escape. A grand jury mandated that Pan's parents surrender their communication and banking records. The U.S. Marshals and FBI uncovered a key detail. Post-murder, the couple repeatedly withdrew large cash sums ranging from $5,000 to $10,000. This was highly unusual. When asked about the money's purpose, they refused to explain, invoking the Fifth Amendment to avoid questions about their son, though suspected of harboring a fugitive. Lack of direct evidence limited police action to close surveillance. Meanwhile, forensic results from the SUV and Arby's items arrived. Pan's fingerprints were found inside and outside the vehicle. His DNA along with gunpowder residue was on the yellow jacket. The black briefcase, gear shift and a granite cap bore Pan's DNA and Kevin's blood. The vehicle's infotainment system had been tampered with, disabling GPS, likely Pan's attempt to erase evidence. With this, police had irrefutable proof that Ching Swan Pan was the killer. On February 26, 2021. New Haven Police Department issued an arrest warrant for Penn on first-degree murder charges despite nationwide media attention. Penn remained elusive for 2 months, leading police to suspect he may have fled the U.S. In April. Interpol issued a red notice for Ching Swan Penn, urging global law enforcement to assist in his capture. Meanwhile, the U.S. Marshals continued monitoring his parents. One day they suddenly rented a car, a suspicious move given they own vehicles. Why rent one? Something was amiss. On May 4, 2021, Penn's parents traveled with another couple with their son, a global fugitive. Their leisurely trip seemed a blatant cover to meet him. Police discreetly followed, discovering they went to North Carolina and checked into a Super 8 hotel to avoid spooking Penn. Police waited until the couple checked out before investigating. Hotel staff revealed that on May 7 at 8:00 p.m. middle-aged woman borrowed a personal phone to make a call captured by surveillance. It was Hong Huang Penn's mother. Her caution: not using her phone or the hotel's but borrowing another, suggested deception, though she deleted the call history. Police retrieved it via the telecom provider, tracing the call to an apartment 10 kilometers from Alabama State University. On May 14, 2021, after days of surveillance, police confirmed Penn was living there under the alias Henry Choi, anticipating an armed and elusive suspect. Over 20 armed officers surrounded the apartment, prepared for a tense confrontation, yet Penn's reaction defied expectations. Opening the door and seeing police, he paused briefly, then calmly said, "I'm the one you're looking for." This stunned the officers. A search of the apartment uncovered his father's passport, 7 SIM cards, several phones, $19,000 in cash, a laptop and personal items. The nearly 3-month manhunt gripping the nation finally ended. Penn was extradited to Connecticut to await trial. Notably, he maintained his innocence throughout, given his parents' multi-million-dollar wealth, and his flight risked. The New Haven Superior Court set bail at $20 million, a record high for Connecticut at the time. On February 27, 2024, Chin Swan Penn's trial began, citing mental health issues and COVID-19 delays. He had postponed proceedings for over 2 years, likely realizing escape was impossible. He abandoned his not guilty plea, striking a deal with prosecutors for a 35-year sentence. Instead of life imprisonment at trial, he offered a perfunctory apology but remained silent on his motive. On April 23, 2024, the judge delivered the final verdict: 35 years in prison with no parole or early release. Kevin's mother tearfully noted that while justice was served, the public remained curious about Pam's true motive. Speculation centered on an obsession with Perry, triggered by her engagement to Kevin. However, this theory has flaws. Before Kevin's murder, 4 other shootings occurred nearby on December 11, 2020, January 15, 2021, and February 6, 2021, all left caliber casings matching Kevin's case but caused no injuries, suggesting random gunfire. Police confirmed Penn was responsible for all. He test drove cars from dealerships, disabling their GPS, returning them each time except the last on February 6, 2021 at 11:00 a.m. when he killed Kevin. Police theorize Penn staged the earlier shootings to frame Kevin's murder as random violence, not a targeted act. This conflicts with the engagement motive, as Penn began the shootings before Kevin's proposal on January 30. Another possibility: Penn harbored a long-standing obsession with Perry, and seeing her happy with another man fueled his rage, leading him to orchestrate a perfect crime with his genius intellect. Yet even the best-laid plans falter. Police admitted that without the SUV getting stuck on the tracks leaving critical clues, finding Penn would have been nearly impossible. A curious detail: the SUV got stuck around 9 p.m. on the murder night. Yet Penn stayed at the scene for over 5 hours until 2:00 a.m. when police arrived. Surprisingly, he didn't flee. Perhaps he knew abandoning the vehicle would expose him, or he was overly confident that his staged shootings would never be traced. Pan's parents faced charges of obstructing justice and aiding a fugitive, but insufficient evidence halted prosecution. Pan's intelligence likely led him to shield his parents, requesting only money, creating a legal shield for them. Kevin's funeral was held 11 days after his death at a New Haven church attended by family, friends, church members, and Yale students and faculty. The pastor, choking back tears, noted he should have officiated Kevin's wedding, not his funeral. Given Kevin's military service and National Guard status, he was laid to rest at the Connecticut State Veterans Cemetery in Middletown. This case serves as a stark reminder that the elite aura of academic brilliance is no measure of moral character. Genius and ambition unchecked by conscience can become a deadly weapon, harming the innocent and destroying the wielder. Reflecting on this tragedy, whatever Pan's motive, no deep enmity existed between him and Kevin. Both were stellar students from top universities with bright futures, yet in a moment of twisted judgment, Pan stole a promising young life and plunged two families into despair. Story 4. Late one night, South Korean football star Sun Hyung sat frozen. Staring at his phone screen. Before him was a blurry ultrasound image accompanied by a chilling message, a threat from someone claiming to be his ex-girlfriend, declaring she was carrying his child in exchange for her silence. She demanded an exorbitant sum of money for the national team captain, whose public image had always been free of scandal. This was nothing short of a waking nightmare. That ultrasound image sparked a sensational extortion case, one that began with a secret romance, unfolded through shadowy threats, and culminated in a criminal duo facing handcuffs under the world's scrutiny. Yoon Hyung, 32 years old, has long been hailed as South Korea's national treasure in football. He is the proud captain of the national team and a shining star in the English Premier League with Tottenham Hotspur. Since joining Tottenham in 2015, Sun has scored 173 goals in 451 matches for the North London club, cementing his place as one of the greatest strikers in the team's history. His talent, professionalism, and disciplined lifestyle have earned him admiration and respect from fans worldwide. Sun once shared that his father, a strict former footballer, advised him to delay marriage until retirement to focus entirely on his career. As a result, Sun's personal life has remained private, almost entirely free of romantic scandals. This made the news of his involvement in an extortion case tied to a love affair all the more shocking. It all began with a clandestine relationship. Sun Hyung reportedly dated a young woman whom we'll call in mid-2024, then 29, was a freelance model who met Sun through mutual friends. Their relationship was brief and entirely under wraps. True to Sun's habit of guarding his private life, neither the media nor his fans knew of her existence until the case exploded into public view. In June 2024, Sun received an unexpected message from his former girlfriend, whom he hadn't seen in months. Her tone was a mix of panic and resolve. She claimed to be pregnant with his child, attaching an ultrasound image as proof. The message wasn't just an announcement, it came with a demand for a large sum of money in exchange for her silence about the pregnancy. Her words, though polite, carried an unmistakable threat. If Sun didn't comply, the story of his out-of-wedlock child would be leaked to the press. Sun was stunned. His mind must have raced with questions. Was the child truly his? If the story broke, what would happen to the reputation he had worked so hard to build? Though skeptical, Sun knew a personal scandal could devastate his carefully crafted image. After a moment of confusion, he chose to act cautiously. He contacted his manager and private lawyer. Within days, a discreet meeting was arranged between Sun A and his representatives to negotiate. At the meeting, A insisted on her pregnancy claim, even presenting medical records from a hospital confirming she was 5 to 6 weeks pregnant. Sun, however, had doubts. The timeline of their encounters didn't align with the age, and the ultrasound image they provided was cropped, missing Critical details like the hospital's name or the patient's identity, his instincts told him something was amiss. But he opted for a peaceful resolution. Sun understood that even if he denied the claims a leaked story about impregnating a girlfriend could irreparably damage his reputation, so he agreed to A's demands immediately. A confidential agreement was swiftly drafted. Sun would pay a $220,000, approximately $300 million, and in return it would sign a non-disclosure agreement (NDA) to remain silent about the pregnancy. On June 24, 2024, just days after the initial threatening message, they informed Sun she had decided to terminate the pregnancy the next day. June 25, she underwent an abortion at a hospital arranged discreetly by both parties. Once the money was transferred to A's account, the agreement was finalized. Sun breathed a sigh of relief, believing the nightmare was over. He had paid and A had gotten what she wanted. After the deal, Sun cut off all contact with A, returning to his routine and focusing on his career. No one outside the inner circle knew of this secret. What Sun didn't anticipate was that the fateful ultrasound image was merely the beginning of a chain of tragedies. The shadow of extortion had briefly retreated, but a year later it would return to haunt him with even greater intensity. The victim in this case is Sun Heung-min, a global superstar but also a young man confronting a personal mistake. Born in 1992, Sun grew up in a family where his father, a former footballer, instilled in him a strong sense of discipline. He moved to Germany as a teenager to train, quickly proving his talent in the Bundesliga before transferring to England at 32. Sun has reached the pinnacle of his career, captain of South Korea's national team, Tottenham's key striker and Golden Boot winner of the Premier League in 2022. Yet the seemingly perfect figure stumbled into an unforeseen trap in his private life, a moment of vulnerability that was ruthlessly exploited. In this story, Sun emerges both as a victim suffering financially and emotionally, and as a courageous individual who stood up to expose wrongdoing to protect his integrity. In contrast to Sun are the two main suspects behind the extortion: A, his secret lover, and a man referred to as B, who later orchestrated the scheme first. A, the woman who sent the ultrasound image to extort Sun, is a complex figure. At 29, she was described as an attractive freelance model. She met Sun through a mutual acquaintance during one of his visits to South Korea, possibly during a national team match or a break between seasons. Their brief romance unfolded quietly, notably during the same period. It was also involved with another man, a successful businessman later referred to as man number one, with Sun as man number two. In other words, it was dating both men simultaneously. When she discovered her pregnancy, she was unsure who the father was. Instead of confronting the truth, A chose to play both sides, informing both men that they were the father. In a leaked recording of a secret conversation later revealed, B confronted A. "Do you even know whose child it is?" A admitted, "How could I possibly know?" When B pressed further, asking why she told the same story to both men, A fell silent because she had indeed claimed to both that they were the father. In the end, the businessman, man number one, ignored A's demands, while Sun, man number two, believed her and agreed to pay. This difference in response made Sun the target for A's exploitation. A's motives seemed primarily financial. After receiving the $220,000, Byung-gun tied $220,000 from Sun. A spent lavishly. According to investigations, she paid $58,000 to a female shaman named C, who had predicted her pregnancy and performed spiritual rituals to cleanse her after the abortion. A and C went on a luxury shopping spree, spending tens of thousands of dollars on designer goods. They also put down a $36,000 deposit on a new apartment and furnished it with expensive items. Within less than a year, most of the $220,000 was gone. It became clear that they had no intention of keeping the child, and the money wasn't used for long-term stability. This led many to view her as a Gold digger who preyed on Sun's trust. However, a darker angle emerged but was heavily influenced by the shaman Se whom she trusted implicitly. C had foretold A's pregnancy and stayed by her side throughout the ordeal, from notifying Sun to the abortion. They even paid C a substantial gratitude fee. This raised questions about C's role. Was she a calculating manipulator, or was I simply seeking spiritual solace? Later C denied any involvement in the extortion, claiming I had tried to move on quietly and blaming B for the subsequent events. Regardless, A's relationship with C suggests she wasn't entirely alone. She had advisors and blind faith that contributed to her initial decision to extort Sun. The other key figure, B, is the true villain of the saga. In his mid-40s, he is described as a man with a criminal record for extortion and a body covered in tattoos. By late 2024, after A had squandered nearly all of Sun's $220,000 payment, she met B through an introduction by the shaman C. A romantic relationship quickly developed between A and B, and within 1 or 2 months they were engaged. By January 2025, on the surface, B played the role of a devoted fiancé, but in reality he became fixated on A's secret. While going through her phone, B stumbled upon the non-disclosure agreement (NDA) regarding the abortion and Sun's payment. He immediately saw it as an untapped gold mine. The NDA included a steep penalty clause. If they revealed the affair, she would owe 10 times the original amount, approximately $2.2 million USD, $3.10 billion. He deemed this clause unfairly harsh on his fiancée, but more importantly, he saw it as a lucrative opportunity to exploit. From late 2024 into early 2025, B devised a second, more intricate extortion scheme. This time his targets weren't just Sun Hung but also A and the shaman C. Anyone tied to the NDA. B's plan unfolded in calculated, duplicitous steps, revealing his cunning and treacherous nature. Step 1. Demanding payment to void the NDA. B approached Sun's representatives posing as A's fiancé. He complained that the NDA's tenfold penalty was too severe, claiming it prevented him from marrying A without fear of legal repercussions. B demanded $14.620 million as compensation in exchange for handing over all related documents, including the NDA and evidence. Essentially, B offered to buy peace for Sun before his wedding to A. However, Sun and his team ignored the demand. They knew that as long as they upheld the NDA's silence, it posed no threat. Step 2. Threatening media exposure. When Sun's side didn't budge, B escalated to public threats. He contacted Dispatch, a notorious South Korean tabloid known for breaking celebrity scandals, and leaked details about the NDA and Sun's extortion ordeal. We hoped the threat of media exposure would pressure Sun into complying. Surprisingly, Dispatch didn't immediately publish the story, possibly conducting their own investigation, as the scandal didn't hit headlines at the time. Step 3. Betraying Stoltze. Frustrated by the lack of results, B executed a shocking betrayal. He contacted Sun's team again, this time aligning himself with Sun to expose A. B provided evidence, recordings, messages between himself and A, claiming that A and the shaman C had deceived Sun. He urged Sun to sue her for fraud, offering his assistance for a price $51,000. 70 million won for providing the evidence. B's greed now extended beyond Sun to A and C. He was willing to sell out his own fiancée for profit. In one message, B boasted that he had spent $58,000, 80 million won, to silence A and C, suggesting that Sun's payment of $51,000 would be a mutually beneficial deal. It was a masterful double cross. At this point, as Sun's team later described, the Pandora's box of the case was flung wide open. The evidence and recordings from B left Sun and his associates reeling. They learned that A had been involved with another man, casting doubt on the paternity of the child, and that her pregnancy claim was likely a calculated ploy for money. The speed with which she terminated the pregnancy after receiving Payment further confirmed her true motive: profit, not motherhood. Son's initial trust in A had cost him dearly, nearly destroying his reputation, but B's greed inadvertently exposed the truth. Around the same time the relationship between A and B began to fracture. Had believed she could rely on B, unaware that he would betray her when his plans faltered. According to dispatch, tensions erupted among A, B and C. In leaked recordings, A pleaded with B to renegotiate the NDA, likely to soften its penalties, while B promised to buy her a house if they could extort billions of won from Son. Meanwhile, C distanced herself from A, suspecting B's manipulation. In a later statement to the press, C claimed B deceived of for months. She tried to stop him, but he kept pushing to extort Son. By early 2025, mistrust and infighting plagued the trio of A, B and C, each pursuing their own agendas. The second extortion scheme was unraveling from within. With the Pandora's box open, Sun Hyung realized it was time to fight back. Continued concessions would only embolden his tormentors. Rather than fear the scandal, Sun chose to confront it head-on. Alongside his lawyers and representatives, he gathered the evidence provided by B: threatening messages, the NDA copy, the original ultrasound image, and recorded conversations. On May 7, 2025, Sun filed a formal complaint with the Gangnam police station in Seoul, detailing how he had been extorted. It was a daunting decision, as it meant his private life would no longer remain hidden, yet Sun and his team believed his honor could only be restored through the truth. They were ready to face public scrutiny rather than keep paying off criminals. Upon receiving a complaint from a global celebrity like Sun Hyung Min, South Korean police sprang into action. The Gangnam police station's investigative team swiftly initiated procedures, summoning Sun and witnesses, including his personal assistant, who reportedly received direct threats from B, collecting physical evidence: Sun's phone containing the threatening messages, a copy of the ultrasound image, and the NDA provided by Sun. Authorities also discreetly monitored A and B, the primary suspects, to ensure they didn't flee. By the evening of May 14, 2025, with sufficient evidence secured, police executed simultaneous arrests of A and B. The two main suspects both were apprehended in Seoul. The media didn't disclose specific details of the arrests, only noting that both were handcuffed and taken to the police station that night. The following day, May 15, prosecutors requested a detention order to hold the suspects during the investigation, citing concerns they might destroy evidence or abscond. On May 17, the Seoul Central District Court held a hearing to review the detention request. After examining the evidence and acknowledging the case's severity, the court approved the detention of both A and B. Thus, the extortion duo officially fell into the hands of the law, facing criminal proceedings. On May 17, 2025, A and B were escorted to the Seoul Central District Court for the detention hearing, not a full trial but a session to determine whether they would remain in custody during the investigation. Outside the courthouse, a swarm of reporters and camera lenses awaited. Given Sunny Youngman's status as South Korea's top football star, media attention was immense as they stepped out of the police van. She wore a hoodie and a face mask, attempting to shield her face with a stack of documents. However, a female officer abruptly pushed the documents aside, exposing A's face, still partially masked but with distinct features visible to the sea of cameras. The image spread like wildfire, sparking heated discussions. A handcuffed and slightly hunched remained silent amid a barrage of reporters' questions. Do you admit to the extortion? Do you have any message for Sun Hyung? Meanwhile, B, the male suspect, arrived at the court simultaneously, but he was more cautious, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a face mask concealing his features more effectively. This contrast fueled public criticism of the authorities. Many argued that the police failed to protect A's basic privacy as an unconvicted suspect, especially since her offense wasn't a violent crime. Some expressed outrage. She's not a brutal murderer to be treated like this. Others noted that even Notorious criminals had been allowed to cover their faces while A was publicly shamed regardless the incident. Underscored the case's media frenzy where every detail at the courthouse became fodder for public debate during the detention hearing. The court reviewed the prosecution's case against A and B. The evidence was compelling text. Messages from A to son including the ultrasound image and her demand for money, the signed NDA, bank records of the $220,000 300 million won transfer and son's own testimony. Police also presented medical findings. Hospital records confirmed A's pregnancy and subsequent abortion, but paternity couldn't be established, bolstering the claim that A fabricated the story of son fathering her child to extort money for B. His messages and recordings with both son's team and A exposed an organized extortion plot. Dispatch further provided police with materials B had shared, including a recording where A admitted she didn't know the child's father and had contacted both men. This evidence clearly showed A and B's collusion in threatening and extorting son with false information about a pregnancy. Faced with this mountain of evidence, A and B remained silent, offering no public statements to the media or the court. Given the case's severity and the risk of evidence tampering or flight, the judge approved their detention pending the completion of the investigation. The case now entered the criminal prosecution phase. A faced charges of extortion and fraud, while B was investigated for complicity and intentional extortion. Both would remain in a sole detention facility until their trial, expected in the coming months. As the investigation continued, postering police noted they were examining key details, notably the authenticity of the ultrasound image A used to extort son was under scrutiny. If the image was not hers or had been altered, it would provide clear evidence of fraud. Additionally, individuals like the shaman C might be questioned to determine any involvement in the extortion scheme. As of late May 2025, no charges had been filed against C, suggesting authorities likely identified A and B as the primary accomplices. The Sun Hyungmin extortion case became a media firestorm, dominating headlines in social media not only in South Korea but worldwide. In South Korea, Sun's name had always been synonymous with positive traits: a dedicated athlete, a humble young man, and a scandal-free figure. Thus, news of him being targeted with a fake pregnancy scheme shocked and outraged the public. Many fans sent messages of support praising Sun's courage in reporting the crime to expose the truth on Korean social media. Comments reflected sympathy. He's just a victim in this, poor son targeted because of his fame and wealth. Some criticized Sun for being careless in his romantic life, but this view was overshadowed by widespread condemnation of A and B. Clearly, in the public's eyes, Sun was the wrong party and the extortionists deserve punishment. South Korean media followed the case meticulously. Major outlets like Chosun Jungang Yilbo and Yonhap provided constant updates. Dispatch, initially contacted by B, published an exclusive investigation revealing behind-the-scenes details: the shaman C's prediction of A's pregnancy, A's simultaneous relationships with two men, and her lavish spending of Sun's money. These revelations, widely cited by other outlets, made the case feel like a cinematic drama. International media also took notice. Reuters and AP reported Sun's complaint about being extorted over a false pregnancy claim, while sports outlets like ESPN and The Guardian emphasized Sun's victimhood in a scheme fueled by fabricated rumors. Sun's global fame amplified the scandal, thrusting his off-field ordeal into the spotlight in Vietnam. Sun's story sparked significant buzz. Vietnamese football fans who admired Sun for his goals and humility discussed the case with a mix of shock, regret, and relief that justice was served. Some outlets affectionately called Sun South Korea's national treasure and expressed outrage on his behalf over the fake pregnancy scheme. On forums, fans remarked that celebrities must beware of illicit relationships and not let fleeting desires ruin a career. Ironically, the scandal coincided with a pivotal moment in Son's career, the Europa League final between Tottenham and Manchester United. Despite the personal turmoil, Son played and led Tottenham to victory, showcasing remarkable professionalism. Many reports suggested that resolving his personal crisis allowed Son to shed emotional weight and focus on the crucial match. A positive outcome of the ordeal was that Son Heung's image not only remained intact, but garnered more sympathy. Unlike scandals caused by moral failings, e.g. gambling or violence, Son was undeniably a victim here. His decision to seek justice rather than conceal the issue earned widespread praise. Son's management company issued a statement: Son Heung is clearly the victim in this matter. We will cooperate fully with the authorities and pursue legal action to the fullest. This resolute stance resonated with the public, who saw Son's actions as not only reclaiming his own justice but also deterring future exploitation of celebrities. However, the case also sparked debates about privacy and gender bias. Some argued that despite her crime it deserved basic personal rights older until a final verdict was reached. The exposure of her face on television was seen as harsh, especially compared to B's more protected treatment. This disparity raised questions about fairness, with critics noting that male criminals often received more leniency in shielding their identities. Others countered that A's actions were particularly egregious, exploiting the sacred role of motherhood as a tool for extortion, making her offense morally reprehensible. These voices called for harsh penalties to set a precedent. The Son Heung extortion case is a riveting tale, blending the glamour of football stardom with the dark underbelly of personal betrayal. From a seemingly innocuous ultrasound image, a sophisticated criminal scheme targeted one of Asia's biggest sports icons. Son endured dark days, betrayed and threatened by someone he once trusted, yet he made the right choice, embracing the light of truth by courageously exposing the crime. Son not only safeguarded his honor but sent a powerful message: no star, no matter how celebrated, is immune to crime without standing up and seeking justice. Now, with the extortionists behind bars awaiting judgment, Son Heung can return to the pitch where he belongs. Fans believe this ordeal will serve as a lesson for Son to be more cautious in his personal relationships. A footballer's career is fleeting, as Son himself has noted, and he's determined not to let off-field chaos derail him to the public. Son remains the dedicated and resilient captain who triumphed in both the 90-minute battles on the field and the grueling fight against temptation and crime. Often his story told as a breathless true crime saga ultimately delivers a satisfying resolution where truth and justice prevail and the guilty face the consequences. Story 5. In the summer of 2012, in a quiet town in West Virginia, USA, 16-year-old Skyla Neese vanished without a trace after slipping out of her bedroom window in the dead of night. A grainy security camera captured the last known images of Skyla alive. In that fleeting footage, she climbed into a car with two of her closest friends. What no one could have imagined was that the very people she trusted most were silently plotting her harm. Why would a teenage friendship end in such cruelty? What could drive two young girls to betray their best friend in the most heartless way? Now let's turn back the clock to 2012 and uncover the tragic story behind Skyla Neese's heartbreaking fate, making it a haven for relaxation and retreat. Yet Morgantown is perhaps best known for West Virginia University. Just beyond the university's campus lies a small town called Star City, with a population of just around 1,800. In 2012 it was a close-knit, peaceful community, a place where everyone knew each other and safety seemed assured. But it was in this seemingly tranquil setting that the shocking crime we're exploring today took place. Skyla Neese was a 16-year-old high school student whose vibrant energy, kindness and sense of responsibility lit up any room. She dreamed of becoming a lawyer, driven by a passion to fight for justice and protect the vulnerable. To achieve that dream, Skylar worked tirelessly excelling academically, earning a spot on her school's honor roll and winning the admiration of her teachers. Born on February 10, 1996 in a modest Star City family, Skyla was an only child, the pride and joy of her parents David and Mary Nye. David worked as a stock clerk at Walmart while Mary was an administrative assistant at a medical laboratory. Skyla was the heart of their world, cherished unconditionally by both her father and mother. From a young age, Skylar was a sweet, well-mannered girl. At 8 years old, she met Sheila Eddy, a girl her age who would become her closest friend. From their first meeting, the two were inseparable, sharing every secret and moment. Sheila came from a challenging background. Her parents had divorced, so Skyla's family welcomed her with open arms. They invited Sheila over for meals, playdates, and shared countless joyful moments, treating her like a daughter, or at the very least a cherished member of the family. The only thing the girls regretted was not attending the same school. That changed when they reached high school. After Sheila's mother remarried, Sheila transferred to the same school as Skyla. From then on, they were like sisters, spending nearly every moment together outside of class, their bond the envy of those around them. But in their sophomore year, a new girl entered the picture, disrupting the delicate balance of Skylar and Sheila's friendship. Her name was Rachel Scoff, a fellow sophomore with a personality that mirrored theirs, perhaps because they were all only children. Rachel quickly bonded with Skyla and Sheila, transforming their dynamic duo into an unbreakable trio. The three girls were inseparable, seen together at school, local bars, picnics, or anywhere they could hang out. To their peers, they were like sisters, and they themselves believed their friendship would last a lifetime. Their social media feeds overflowed with photos capturing their joyful moments, a testament to a bond that seemed unshakable. Sheila, in particular, was an avid Twitter user, sharing her every thought with the world. By their junior year, Skylar chose to focus on her studies, opting out of dating, while Sheila and Rachel each had boyfriends. Yet this difference didn't strain their friendship. They remained as tight as ever, texting daily, their presence a constant in each other's lives, even when personal schedules briefly pulled them apart. But a horrifying tragedy was about to shatter this idyllic picture. Beneath the surface of their seemingly unbreakable bond, a chilling truth was lurking. In July 2012, summer break arrived, a time students eagerly awaited, a chance to unwind after a long school year. Some traveled, others explored, and some, like Skyla Nye, took on part-time jobs to earn extra money. Skyla landed a job at a local fast food restaurant near her home on July 5. Skyla worked until 10 p.m. before heading home. After showering and saying goodnight to her parents as usual, she retreated to her room. No one could have known it would be the last time they saw her. The next morning, David and Mary left for work early, as was their routine. Around noon, David returned home, planning to leave the car for Skyla to use for her afternoon shift, but when he arrived, he found Skyla's bedroom door locked with no response to his knocks. This was unusual. Even if Skylar were sleeping deeply, she would have woken to the sound. Growing uneasy, David checked the window outside her room. What he saw sent a chill down his spine. The room was empty. The window's insect screen had been removed, and a stool was propped against the wall below. Clear evidence that Skylar had climbed out. Why would his daughter sneak out like that? She was home alone. There was no need to escape through a window. David reasoned she might have gone out to meet friends, something not uncommon for a 16-year-old. She'd done it before, but it was past noon and she should have been back by now. More troubling, she hadn't taken her phone, charger, toothbrush, or any personal items, suggesting she planned to be gone only briefly. David called Skyla's phone, but it was off. A gnawing sense of dread began to take hold as hours passed with no sign of her. He contacted her closest friend, Sheila Eddy. Sheila claimed Skylar hadn't come to see her the previous night and that she had no idea where Skyla was. David reached out to others, but no one had any information. By 4 p.m. panic set in. Skyla's shift at the fast food restaurant was about to start. and she was never one to shirk her responsibilities. If she hadn't shown up by now, something was terribly wrong. David immediately called Mary to come home. At that moment, Skylar's boss called asking why she hadn't shown up for work. Without notice, this only deepened David and Mary's fears, confirming that something had happened. And Sheila called back. She admitted she'd lied earlier. She and Rachel, she had picked Skylar up around 11 p.m. the previous night for a short drive around Morgantown. They were together for about 50 minutes before dropping Skylar off at the end of her street to avoid waking her parents with the car's noise. Sheila claimed Skylar walked toward her house, but she didn't know if Skylar made it home. David and Mary trusted Sheila. She and Skylar had been like sisters since they were 8. They believed her story and began to fear that something had happened to Skylar after she was dropped off, perhaps an abduction or an accident. Nearly 24 hours later, the situation grew dire. David reported to the police that his 16-year-old daughter had snuck out the previous night and hadn't been seen since. The police quickly mobilized a search. David and Mary enlisted friends, family and Skylar's teachers to help Sheila. Eddie even brought her mother to the Nice home to comfort Skylar's parents and join the neighborhood search, but no one in the community had seen Skylar since the night before. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. In their desperation, David and Mary remembered that their apartment complex had recently installed security cameras. If Skylar had left, the cameras would have caught it. After the police retrieved the footage, they saw Skylar at 12:30 a.m. on July 6 wearing a small backpack, climbing into a light-colored car waiting outside. The car then sped off into the night. Unfortunately, the video quality was too poor to identify the driver, the license plate, or even the car's make. Still, the footage confirmed one thing: Skylar had left willingly with no apparent signs of coercion or abduction. This, however, contradicted Sheila's story. She claimed she'd picked Skylar up at 11 p.m., but the video showed Skylar leaving at 12:30 a.m. There were only two possibilities: either Sheila was lying or Skylar had returned home after her outing with Sheila and left again with someone else at 12:30. Given Sheila and Skylar's close bond, most lean toward the latter explanation. For now, the police were somewhat reassured. They believed Skylar had left of her own accord, likely a teenage escapade that would last a few days, despite David and Mary's insistence that their daughter was responsible and would never do such a thing. The police downplayed their concerns. They chose not to activate the Amber Alert system, a nationwide emergency broadcast established in 1996 to locate missing or abducted children. Since there was no clear evidence of abduction or immediate danger, left with no other options, David and Mary took matters into their own hands. They rallied friends, posted missing person flyers, and offered a $3,000 reward for any useful information. Sheila and her mother frequently visited to console the family and help distribute flyers across Star City. With only 1,800 residents, the small town was soon blanketed with posters, yet no leads emerged. By July 9, with Skylar missing for over 48 hours, the police began to take the case more seriously. Officer Jessica, the lead investigator, sensed something was off. If Skylar had simply run away, she would likely have posted on social media, used her phone, or withdrawn money, but there was no activity since her disappearance. This led Jessica to suspect Skylar might be held against her will, or worse. With no results from searching Star City, the police expanded their efforts across West Virginia, but still found nothing. David and Mary turned to social media, posting pleas for help on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, hoping the online community could assist. David even appeared on local television to appeal for his daughter's return. These efforts yielded a few tips. Sightings reported in New York, California, and Los Angeles, but all proved to be false leads. Skylar remained missing as days turned to weeks. David and Mary were consumed by grief, crying endlessly. Sheila continued to visit, offering comfort and support. By late August. The new school year began and Skyla had been missing for over a month. Her absence dominated conversations at school. Initially, students speculated about where she might be or whether she'd left the country, but soon darker theories emerged, with some suggesting Skyla might have overdosed or met a tragic end. Eventually, suspicion turned to Skyla's two best friends, Rachel and Sheila. The trio had been inseparable, and their classmates were convinced the two girls knew more than they were letting on. Whispers in the schoolyard and hallways grew louder, and online rumors and theories exploded, most pointing fingers at Rachel and Sheila. Fueled by public pressure, the police and private investigators dug deeper into the two girls. They analyzed the trio's social media activity and found troubling clues. Before her disappearance, Skylar had posted cryptic messages on Twitter. "It's not that hard to piss me off, actually. So tired of sitting at home. Thanks for hanging out. I wish I could too, and you keep doing that, and I can't fully trust you anymore." These posts suggested Skylar was upset, possibly clashing with her closest friends. Sheila's social media raised red flags too. On August 5, when someone suggested she and Rachel were suspects, Sheila responded, "No one in this world can touch me and Rachel. If you think you can, you're wrong." Though vague, her words hinted at something amiss. Public criticism of Sheila and Rachel intensified, with some even labeling them murderers. Online harassment escalated, with daily messages demanding they confess. Based on these social media clues, the police obtained a search warrant on September 3, seizing Sheila and Rachel's phones and electronic devices. By September 10, the case had gained so much traction online that the FBI and state police joined the investigation. They identified Sheila and Rachel as the last people to see Skyla and as her closest confidants, combined with the growing consensus among classmates that the two were hiding something. The authorities brought them in for questioning. During interrogations, Sheila and Rachel stuck to their story. On the night of July 5, they picked Skyla up around 11 p.m. for a brief drive in Morgantown, returned within an hour, dropped her off at the end of her street, and watched her walk toward her house. They claimed ignorance of what happened next. The FBI interviewed other students, but little new information surfaced. Though many believed Sheila and Rachel were concealing something, the police couldn't extract more, leaving the investigation at a standstill. Local Police Chief Jessica decided to revisit the case from square one. She hypothesized that Rachel and Sheila were the culprits and began pursuing that angle. If the two girls were responsible, the car captured on the surveillance footage would belong to them. After investigating, Jessica confirmed that Sheila Eddie's mother owned a silver Chevrolet which matched the vehicle in the midnight surveillance video with startling precision. Armed with this lead, Jessica reviewed traffic cameras west of Star City. She doubted Sheila and Rachel's claim that they had driven east to Morgantown. Fortunately, some traffic footage from the time of the incident was still archived. Upon review, authorities spotted the silver Chevrolet belonging to Sheila's family heading west that early morning, not east as the girls had claimed. However, since months had passed, the cameras couldn't pinpoint the car's exact route. A breakthrough came when police extracted data from the telecommunications provider. On that fateful morning, Rachel's phone signal had pinged a tower in Blackville, about 17 miles from Star City. This confirmed the girls had at least passed through Blackville. Police also recalled Rachel's behavior after Skyla's disappearance. She showed no concern vacationing with her mother and agreeing to speak with investigators only by phone, refusing to return during the call. Her tone was detached, claiming ignorance. "Imagine if your best friend vanished, wouldn't you drop everything to help?" Rachel's indifference raised red flags. These discoveries turned the case upside down. The two girls everyone trusted had been lying from the start. While it wasn't yet clear if they were the perpetrators, their involvement was undeniable when police shared these findings with Skylar's parents. David and Mary were in disbelief after Skylar went missing. Rachel and Sheila had actively participated in the search, frequently visiting to comfort the family. Sheila in particular had broken down sobbing on Skyla's bed when police repeatedly summoned Sheila for questioning. Skyla's father David defended her, urging them to stop harassing the grieving girl. By November 2012, when police presented evidence of Rachel's phone signal in Blackville, she abruptly changed her story after sticking to the same narrative dozens of times. She now claimed they had driven to Blacksville that night, where Skyla got out of the car and left without saying where she was going. The next day Sheila altered her story to match Rachel's almost word for word. Police immediately saw through this. It wasn't a coincidence. The girls were coordinating to conceal something. Despite suspicions of collusion, the police lacked enough evidence to charge them as the investigation expanded. Rachel and Sheila's phones and electronics were seized, and tension in the town grew, stifling. Most residents believed the girls were guilty at school. Classmates gave them wary looks, and online condemnation intensified. Sheila continued posting carefree thoughts on social media, seemingly unbothered, while Rachel grew visibly anxious, irritable, and erratic under immense pressure. Rachel broke down on December 28. She had a mental collapse at home, leaving her mother overwhelmed and forced to call the police. Rachel was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. Days later, the case took a dramatic turn. Under her lawyer's supervision, Rachel agreed to tell police the full truth. Barely into the questioning, she blurted out, "We stabbed her." Rachel then recounted the chilling events of July 5, 2012. It wasn't a spur-off moment act, but a meticulously planned murder prepared over months. They had brought clean clothes, gloves and cleaning supplies stored in Sheila's suitcase. Rachel took a shovel from her home, while Sheila brought 2 knives. Driving the silver Chevrolet, they arrived near Skyla's house around 12:30 a.m. They had texted Skyla beforehand, convincing her to sneak out through her window. A moment caught on the surveillance camera. The trio drove west through back roads for about an hour. Arriving at a wooded area near Blacksville, they got out, sat under a tree by a river, and used drugs together. As Skyla returned to the car for a lighter, Sheila began counting 1, 2, 3. Before the count ended, both girls pulled knives from their jackets and attacked Skyla, stabbing her relentlessly. Unprepared, Skylar could only struggle weakly before collapsing, her body pierced over 50 times. In her final moments, racked with pain and betrayal, she whispered why. After the deed, the girls tried to dig a grave with the shovel, but found the ground too hard. Instead, they covered Skylar's body with branches and dirt. They changed into the clean clothes they had brought, drove back, and disposed of the bloodied knives and clothing. Along the way, the police were stunned. How could 2 16-year-old high school girls commit such a brutal act? When pressed for a motive, why would you do this to your best friend? Rachel coldly replied, "We just didn't like her anymore, no other reason." Rachel led police to the crime scene, but heavy snow and the darkness of that night made it hard for her to pinpoint the exact location. Despite being in the right area, they couldn't find Skyla's body. With no remains, murder weapons or concrete evidence, and given Rachel's history of lying in her unstable mental state, police held off on arresting her and kept her confession confidential while focusing on Sheila. Rachel offered to assist police to atone for her actions. She wore a wire during a meeting with Sheila at her home, subtly bringing up Skylar to elicit a response, but Sheila, either cautious or cunning, revealed nothing significant. On January 4, 2013, based on Rachel's confession, police obtained a warrant to search Sheila's home. The FBI seized the silver Chevrolet and all knives in the house. Meanwhile, the search for Skyla's body continued. On January 16, police found a heavily decomposed body near a tree in the woods near Blacksville, just across the Pennsylvania state line. It wasn't until March 13 that a medical examiner confirmed through dental records that it was Skyla. Police held a press conference to announce the development, but Sheila still refused to confess. She wept publicly upon hearing Skylar's body Was found hugging classmates and crying, "Who could be so cruel to my best friend?" She posted mournful tributes to Skylar on social media, yet on April 1 Sheila posted a cryptic message that read like a confession: "Yes, we counted to 1, 2, 3 and did it by late April 2013. Police found blood traces in Sheila's suitcase and on the Chevrolet, with DNA tests confirming it was Skylar's. Combined with Rachel's confession, phone data and social media posts, authorities had enough evidence to arrest both girls. On May 1, Rachel turned herself in, admitting to the murder. She had been ready to surrender once police issued the order. Simultaneously, officers arrested Sheila while she dined with her mother at a restaurant. Realizing the game was up, Sheila turned to her mother and naively asked, "Mom, everything's going to be okay, right?" On September 16, 2013, with all evidence compiled, a grand jury indicted Sheila on charges of first-degree murder, kidnapping and conspiracy to commit murder. Though she was under 18 at the time of the crime, West Virginia courts tried her as an adult. Throughout her hearings, Sheila denied guilt, remaining indifferent even as prosecutors presented irrefutable evidence because the crime scene was in Pennsylvania. That state could also charge her. Ultimately, under strong advice from her lawyer, Sheila pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. On January 28, 2014, a judge sentenced Sheila to life in prison. However, since she was a minor at the time of the crime, a 2012 Supreme Court ruling allowed her eligibility for parole after 15 years. A month later, on February 26, 2014, Rachel's sentencing began. Having pleaded guilty early under a plea deal and shown remorse, she received 30 years with parole eligibility after 10 years. With these sentences, the heartbreaking and perplexing case finally closed, though the motive remained elusive. Rachel's claim that they just didn't like her convinced no one, notably Sheila, and Rachel's courtroom behaviors were starkly different. Sheila showed no remorse, refusing to apologize to Skylar's parents, who had once treated her like a daughter. Entering the courtroom, she smiled brightly, fussing with her hair as if attending a social event. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she replied nonchalantly, "Nothing to say." In contrast, Rachel broke down in tears multiple times, unconcerned with her appearance, and sincerely apologized to Skylar's family. "I'm so sorry, I don't know how to express it. I feel overwhelming guilt and regret for what I've done. In many cases, victims' families forgive remorseful perpetrators, but Skylar's parents rejected Rachel's apology, dismissing it as a performance. They believed her cooperation with police stemmed only from knowing she couldn't escape justice. David told the judge, "You called this a crime against a person. She doesn't deserve any leniency. She can keep her apology and everything else to herself. It's meaningless to me and my wife. From day one, she's brought us nothing but hell." As for Sheila, Skylar's family had little to say. They only hoped the deceitful and ruthless killer would remain behind bars forever. Prosecutor Marcia declared, "The brutality of this crime sends chills down my spine. Despite their frail, harmless appearance, the girls had planned this horrific act for months. Most heartbreakingly, their target was their closest friend after the murder. They showed no remorse, repeatedly lying to police, and unforgivable betrayal. Skylar's death rocked West Virginia. Though she was killed the night she vanished, the police's initial slow and dismissive response, particularly their failure to activate an Amber Alert, sparked outrage. While not entirely their fault, as the case didn't meet Amber Alert criteria, it exposed the system's limitations. Effective for clear abductions, the system struggles with ambiguous disappearances, potentially missing critical golden hours for rescue. David shared that he didn't want other families to endure their pain. He and Mary worked with state legislators to propose Skylar's law, expanding West Virginia's alert system to cover all missing persons, especially at-risk teens. In March 2013, the West Virginia House passed Skylar's law unanimously, 98-0. 2 months later the governor signed it into law, a small solace for Skylar's parents. They transformed the site where Skylar was found into a modest memorial with a flower garden. When grief overwhelmed them, they visited the tree. To be near their daughter, Skylar's friends and locals also frequented the site, leaving flowers and prayers. Skylar's case left an indelible scar on the small town students and residents, prompting questions about the nature of friendship and trust. Many students admitted they could no longer trust anyone, yet the story doesn't end here. On May 9, 2023, Rachel Scoff became eligible for parole after serving 10 years. Skylar's parents couldn't fathom the killer of their daughter walking free after just a decade. A friend of David's launched a petition to keep Rachel imprisoned, garnering over 30,000 signatures in days. The parole board denied Rachel's request on July 8, 2024. Rachel applied for parole again, claiming she had reformed, earning a bachelor's degree, obtaining a cosmetology license, and leading fellow inmates in daily prayers. She insisted she was ready to be a productive citizen. The board took just 10 minutes to reject her, citing multiple prison infractions that contradicted her model prisoner claim. Sheila will be eligible for parole in May 2028. During her imprisonment and parole hearings, Rachel gradually revealed the true motive behind the shocking crime. Initially, Skylar and Sheila were a tight duo. When Rachel joined, they became a trio, but dynamics shifted. Sheila, a rebellious party-goer, grew closer to Rachel than Skylar. They began dressing alike, taking photos without Skylar, and often left her behind. In truth, Sheila and Rachel had become romantically involved by summer 2012. Their relationship was evident on July 4. Sheila and Rachel went out without inviting Skylar, who tweeted her disappointment. Police later found entries in Skylar's diary describing a sleepover at Rachel's where, after drinking, she saw Sheila and Rachel kissing. Skylar tweeted that she'd reveal their secret to the school. According to Rachel, she and Sheila feared exposure of their same-sex relationship, which strained their trio into hostility. Ultimately, they chose to silence Skylar to protect their secret, though Skylar's parents found this motive flimsy. It was the closest to a plausible explanation of the three. Skylar was the most innocent, Sheila the most rebellious and dangerous, posted extreme content online, and acted impulsively. Classes described her as exuding dark energy. Many worried Skylar would be negatively influenced by Sheila, and tragically they were right. Police uncovered a chilling video from 6 months before the murder. In it, Sheila asked Rachel and Skylar, if you had to die, would you choose suffocation or a bullet? Rachel replied, a bullet, but it depends where. A headshot wouldn't hurt much. Skylar said, bullet or suffocation? Probably suffocation. Another friend told police Rachel had long expressed disdain for Skylar, saying, I really don't like her, I wish she'd disappear forever. To the two girls, their best friend's life meant nothing. Reflecting on the case, it's hard to fathom what hatred could drive three teenage girls to such extremes. Even with disagreements or jealousy, there were countless other ways to resolve their issues. Their choice of such a drastic act highlights a failure in education. Adolescence is a vulnerable transition, and without proper guidance from schools and families, the consequences can be catastrophic. Education isn't just about grades, it's about shaping character, morals, and a sound worldview. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper, thank you for joining me here at MR Nightcared True Crime Stories. Remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep, and until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.